Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. I'm Random Randy, popping back in with another episode for everybody out there. Right up front, I want to go ahead and thank everybody who's subscribed, commented, all of these things, checked out the podcast, checked out the YouTube. Muchas gracias. I mean, it's amazing to see so many people interacting with each other on account of some rants that I've had. So absolutely amazing. Keep it up. I'll keep putting stuff out for you fine folks to chew on, some thoughts for you to consider, and a pretty extensive one today, a pretty deep one. This dive is like infinitely deep. So we'll see how much we can get into this video. We might split it into two, not 100% sure, but the topic of conversation today is going to be kind of circling around the word homunculus. And there's been a few people that have looked into this recently, and it's a big rabbit hole, a huge rabbit hole. Um, I mean, it's really expansive. But where I'm going to start is a little bit with some mainstream historical kind of background. So things like Artemis, the Temple of Artemis, the goddess Artemis. Um, and we will dig really deeply into that. There's a lot of really weird, interesting things going on, as you can see in the picture on the screen here. This is the goddess Artemis, and there are several things that are very interesting about this. Are these mammary glands? Are these bull testicles? There are several theories out there, all right, that we see in regards to these danglies on her chest here. Another interesting thing is when you look at the different necklaces she's wearing, some of them look like small seeds, some of them look like acorns. Um, One looks like a wreath. I mean, there's so much here that I could probably do just an episode on just these pictures of Artemis alone. But I kind of want to get into some other things like the connection to homunculi and the connection with that word, homunculi, and Homo sapien, human, right? We think of ourselves as the top dogs quite often, but more and more there's evidence coming up that there were a larger group of people here before us. So, as usual, you can find some of these thoughts in stolenhistory.net, right? Go take a look over there. I mean, they've got a lot of these thoughts laid out pretty nicely, guys, pretty nicely. I'm not going to lie. And so we're going to start out with the Temple of Artemis because I think that this is kind of a residue of some kind of you can call it tomfoolery if you want, you can call it manipulation, right, of the genome and things like that, having to do with this supposed ancient fertility goddess. Now the mainstream tells us that this ancient fertility goddess was like the Virgin Mother, essentially the Virgin Mary version before the Virgin Mary kind of came out. And I know that before sounded a lot like David Hatcher Childress. So, that's cool. But anyway, so there's a whole mainstream story behind all of this. This is the new mainstream, right? I call it the new mainstream simply because it's listed in Stolen History thread, meaning that it is okay for us as the masses to consume this information. Okay, so here's the hypothesis, and this is a thought that I've had too. Something I'll point out for all of you folks is I don't always agree with everything that I say myself. In fact, I think that this world is so wild and wonderful and interesting that if you seek information, you will find it. And it doesn't matter what that is. The earth is flat, the earth is round, the earth is a pancake. The earth is an eyeball of a giant floating within the ocular cavity of an even more massive thing. We don't know. You know what I mean? We are limited to our scale of perception. And I think scale is a big, big part of it too. So, that being said, let's dive into Artemis, the Temple of Artemis, and the hypothesis today. The Temple of Artemis, aka the Temple of Diana, was responsible for providing this planet with creatures of various types, including humans. While this specific temple was located in Ephesus, I doubt that it was the only one. As a matter of fact, I would be surprised if it was. Below listed goddesses represent genetic factories of sorts. So this is the thought, okay? Let's see, Fontana de Triton, Rome, Temple of Artemis and Diana of Ephesus, Egyptian Isis. There's a connection here, which is kind of how I stumbled on this, the connection with the foundling hospitals, the foundling societies of the 1800s. If you're tuned into this channel, you know that I'm dude just big on the fact that our history is an illusion, a lie, a misleading story. And like all good stories, there are elements of truth within. Same with this particular well written thread here. Okay. There's going to be some things that you might agree with. There will be some things maybe you don't. One of which he gets off into a tangent about ISIS, the rebel group, in Iraq and Syria. So that, I don't necessarily agree with. And what that has to do with is the influx of certain people into this world, right? We have a lot of people moving going on in this world with things going on overseas, in Russian areas and things like that. We have a lot of movement of people. And the thought is that this is a strategic thing, right? That people are being shifted around. Possibly some of these people are being created is the idea behind this. And by being I don't mean being born of a mother and father. We mean like putting zygote, into a lab of some kind, very similarly to some of this stuff, right? We mean growing. Some of us maybe were grown. Some of the foundlings maybe were grown. How did they wind up with so many babies in these foundling organizations of all the same age? Um, One thought is war, right? A war, creates, a lack of parenting, right? So anyway, back to Artemis. Artemis is a goddess of fertility, whatever you can call it. But some things to point out are at the very top of her head, you have what looks like a city wall. It's called a city wall structure or a castle turret, right? So, what this suggests to me is that on ground level, here's what we see a building. That's it, right? And I know that some of you out there looking into Tartaria and stuff have seen those pictures where you see like the Capitol building and then a cutaway of the earth underneath it. And these are fictional pictures, of course, cutaway of the earth underneath it, showing this temple going down forever, like just infinitely downward. We don't know how deep all of this infrastructure goes. And I think the same can be said here. I'll apologize for the work going on outside right quick. But anyway, so are these testicles? Are these eggs? Right? That's what my thought was when I saw these. I was like, oh, dude, that reminds me of the Matrix. Totally reminds me of the Matrix and like this, right? I mean, I don't, yeah, it's a stretch. Yeah, it's silly, haha, boo, whatever. But did the chicken come before the egg? Like, really? Like, where the heck did the first egg come from? You know what I mean? A lot of us will say, oh, well, God created Adam and Eve, and then they had kids, right? But is there a process, a physical process that God or this creator entity, or the Anunnaki, if you're into that story, there would have to be a material, tangible process that would happen, a physical process to create these first people. Okay. Um, I think that it's interesting that so many people believe that their belief is the end all be all and that everyone else's belief is wrong. I think that that's kind of a silly thing for us as humanity to focus on, the perspectives of others and picking those apart and saying that these are correct or incorrect, when really I think that we all have a piece of it, guys. I really think we all, in our own unique perspectives, our own personal truths, we all have a piece of this larger puzzle. So it's a possibility that some of this information coming to us in mainstream, whether it's the Anunnaki connection or whether it is, something like the Matrix, like we see here, or even stories that we see going back in time of homunculi, right? It used to be believed that inside of a a spermazoa was a tiny man, and it kind of is. It's the catalyst to create that person, right? So, it's not it's not completely false, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And what I find interesting here is you see this uh flask that this person is being gestated in. If you ever look at like the paintings of the Pope, right, in one of his hands, he'll have this ball with oftentimes an aerial coming out of it, or a couple of crosses. And what do we see exactly here in this artwork? Of course, it's just artwork. Relax, it'll be okay. All right. So this is just artwork, but it's something to think about when you look at the just all right. Let's get straight into the Foundling connection, because this is something that I want to pick on for a minute. Um, the arms of the Foundling Hospital. Check this out, guys. Artemis on one side, and we will go through a lot more pictures of Artemis because you're going to want to see all these different layers to Artemis. And if you notice on this particular one, her breasts are arranged in a tree of life pattern. So this is unique in itself. I haven't seen this particular rendition of her anywhere aside from this Foundling Hospital coat of arms. Okay. Another interesting thing is we have one moon and two suns up here. So maybe, shout out to that black sun everyone keeps talking about, right? Possibly. So, Foundling Hospital. It said that Artemis symbolizes nature. Okay, it may very well be, Mother Nature, the Mother Goddess. I think they call her Magnus Mater, or the First Mother. Um, so that's one. All right, let's see. Uh, Cybele is another version. This is a previous version, right? A Greek version. And like all of the history that we were given, we only get as far back as the Greek. That's kind of like where it all comes from. So Cybele would have been the mother, uh, the one before Zeus and Gaia, that essentially separated and became Zeus and Gaia. Okay, something to that effect. Anyway, it gets really weird when you're digging into Cybele. She ends up having a fling with her own son, but it turns out Cybele was a transgender of some kind, being that its phallus was removed to keep it from procreating, yet somehow it did. It's this whole long, weird story. We won't really dig too far into that. Just go take a look up Cybele if you're interested in the background here. Um, but this is like before Artemis, okay? Because we're told Greek background comes from prior to the Roman background. So that is what it is in the mainstream. There's a lot on Cybele, okay? And there's even more on Artemis. Now, Artemis has a connection with the Barberini family, okay, and their heraldic bees. Now, a lot of people want to feel like the bee symbolism is a negative thing. I just think it's there for a purpose to show us that that we are created, and what that means to some people is a very spiritual and divine thing. What that can mean to other people when you look at the material side of it, like perhaps at some point humanity was started or restarted through a facility, through a temple of Artemis, possibly, right? So it's just a thought, guys. Don't take it the wrong way if you're leaning left, right, up, down, whichever way you lean. Just keep an open mind about this stuff, because ultimately we really don't know. We will not be told, right? In our history books, through the Rockefellerian uh, school system that we all take part in, we're not going to be shown all of the connections. Okay. We're just going to be shown how to be good little workers, good little worker bees, even, right? Um, they more and more are blending us together personality wise, sexuality wise. It's all being blended back into a kind of worker drone mentality with a very stringent, rigid set of rules, much like the bees follow in their own nests. A very, very organized, hierarchical kind of structure. And that's what, we're being led into with this new world order and all of this. Um, so is it, a far cry to think that maybe we didn't start out kind of like that and have since kind of gone awry and developed our own personalities, our own thoughts, and now they're trying to rein it back in? I think that that's a possibility. Sorry about the glare back here, guys, but I didn't have a moment to put up the curtain. Anyway, so bees are a connection to heraldry, right? Like to legend, to Roman families. So it ties into their interesting thing about their progression of their crest is it went from common black horseflies to golden horseflies, and now they are golden bees. So does this mean they are achieving whatever their role was set out to be upon this rollout of this current paradigm? Possibly. So hopefully I haven't lost you all too much. But looking at the Temple of Artemis, we have some different kind of renditions here. Um, and they both may very well be right, at one point or another. One looking very much larger than the next, but who knows? We see around the world the architecture of the past was very megalithic, very large, very suggestive of a larger people existing before us. So the bee and the cult of Artemis. The early association of the bee with the cult of Artemis is attested by varied evidence. It appears not only upon the strange polymastoid statue. I like that word, polymastoid, of the Ephesian goddess, but upon the earliest coins of her city, as the owl was the emblem of Athena. Keep that in mind, guys, the owl being the emblem of Athena. So everything that we're seeing, Tartarian flags, so on and so forth, it all goes back to Rome. Okay. Rome is the system. It's what plucks the strings in this place, guys. And you can get mad about it if you want. You can decide that no, Rome or this control structure doesn't exist if you'd like. That's cool. But in order to have an organized society with a certain set of rules in place, you have to have a way to enforce it and to populate it. So did the chicken come before the egg? Who knows, right? But interesting thought is that there's this group, this cult of Artemis. So we're going to look at in a couple of seconds here some of the different examples of these. Now, another title for her was beekeeper. Okay. Um, the priestesses would receive the name Melissa, meaning bee. Okay. So there's some tie-ins to this, some tie-ins to why some people think of themselves as part of a swarm, right? Um, and again, just to be quite clear, I don't have anything against people's identifications with groups or anything like that. I think it's fine. We all need to have our own perspective and need to have our own journey in front of us in order to have this experience. And I think that it's wonderful, regardless of what your experience happens to be. So, the bees of Artemis, okay, the twin sister of God. So you can look at this also like the demiurge, right? The demiurge likes to think of itself as a god. So if you're into like Gnostic lore, that sort of thing, you can look at this place like it's an ant farm, right? And that there must be, a queen or an initial creation point. You can call it God, but I think God is much more expansive. Just a personal note, guys. I think God is all, right? And God is love. And in order for us to understand and appreciate that love and that all, we have to learn what nothing is. We have to learn what darkness is. It's almost unfortunate if it wasn't so conducive to growth. That's, and I'm not trying to validate the agendas of those in charge. What I'm trying to say is, in each of our individual lives, we have some growing to do, and we do that. Interesting thing is we've got to learn to grow without being so attached that we wind up stuck here or something. So anyway, Artemis, the goddess as a queen bee. So you see the interesting series of characters here, going all the way down the different levels of Artemis, right? Some of them are animals. You get further along, you have different types of animals. They're all in their own little like cubby hole here. Um, one thought that I had was this could be a representation of the ark. Okay. Like what we think of as the ark being a boat may very well be, but what if it's a ship through time? What if, these genetics are stored beneath this temple, right? Temple on her head, remember? Beneath this temple, you have different layers where different things are happening. Now, what's interesting about this is, and again, go and check out stolenhistory.net. You'll find this thread, type in Artemis, you'll find it. Now, the queen bee, right? We have a lot of popular culture, rap lyrics. I'm the queen bee, whoop de whoop, all that stuff. So, are these people really just the newest version of this cult of Artemis? Okay, meaning that it's still going on, it's still taking place. Um, is this why they feel compelled to reduce the population in order to introduce their own? Possibly, right? So there's a lot of crazy things that you can go and say and think when it comes to these bees and this goddess. Now, so yeah, some people were like, oh, those are bull testicles. Some are like, oh, those are mammary glands. And then others look at it and see these, right? Some eggs. The Isis multimamia. And here's a better version of this temple up top here. Okay. Interesting is she has arms are lions, right? So that would be like her arms are the military or the lions. And in her core, she's nurturing with all of these mammals, all of these beings beneath. And they go all the way down, uh, much like this. See if I can find it. There it is. This is the chain of being, guys. Okay. And it's a very interesting depiction with, a god figure at the top. Of course, the pyramid being at the very top of the godhead there. You have the Holy Spirit or the mother, and you have the son. And again, you have this flask. Is this a representation of creation? Possibly, right? So going on down the line, we have an angel up here with what looks like a lens of some kind, possibly reflecting the light of heaven down to these other places. Okay. Something to take a look at is many of the angels have only one hand visible. And let's see here. Let me get that pulled up so that we can. And it gets weird, guys. Like this picture is interesting. I recommend looking it up. And it's, suggesting that the angels fall from heaven down below. What it looks like down here, some people would say, oh, it's fires of hell. There's a lot of torture and things going on. I think it's dissemination and extraction of different parts of these people and these beings. And then somehow reintegrating it to do its own thing. But anyway, you see this layering happening here. Angels, humans. Interesting thing about where the humans are is take a look at this, guys. We got big people and we got little people. We got big people and we've got little people. I don't know why we are so stuck on the concept that we're like the first, the end all be all, and like the biggest, most badass people. I think that that's kind of far from the truth. Now, you see that we are, as a collective, creating a new intelligence through AI. Why is it such a big problem to think that that hadn't happened before? That these larger people would have been very differently built from than us. They would have had different genetic structures. They would have had different everything. They would have been, in order to be stable and as large as some of them were, 15, 30, sometimes more feet, based on historical record and what we're told, they would have to have a different structure. Is it really blasphemy to say that we are a part of a once great civilization recreated through possibly a cult or an organization or a facility that then, gestated us onto this world. Okay, so it's the material explanation of the immaterial spiritual understanding. Okay, there would have to be a physical catalyst to make these things happen. What that looks like scientifically, I don't know. What is it, a facility like this, or is it a more spiritual facility where the work taking place isn't on this physical realm? That's possible too. So, I'm not saying underneath every temple there is a cloning factory, but I do see that there are a lot of folks out there leaning a bit heavy on the human cloning thing. And we'll get into some articles, some interesting stuff here in a minute. But you see the different characters, the different creatures, Chimera are down here also right next to the little people. So it's interesting, right? It's very interesting. It's a very strange goddess. And these are found everywhere, guys. Like everywhere in the world, you could find Mother Goddess. Uh, and what's weird is this one kind of looks, a little alien here. So, is that why we think of aliens as having giant big eyes? Because we're relating them to bees? And are we relating them to bees? Because Artemis is the bee goddess. So, uh, and that's where the term alma mater comes from. uh Nourishing mother. Okay, first mother, nourishing mother, a couple different names for Artemis. So it's interesting that there are so many different versions of this goddess here. But if it looks to me like when you look at this alma mater Cantabrigia logo here, she's holding the sun in one hand and the rain in another, and land or a castle on her head. And there's a lot of stuff going on here that's similar to the Masonic kind of imagery, right? Instead of two pillars, we have two trees, sun, moon. Instead, we have, maybe some lightning. So some interesting stuff going on in these family crests. Always interesting to look at old engravings, artwork, family crests, and see like what's going on here. So, and right in the center of her chest, she has a scarab. So that's interesting in itself. Um, the angels holding a wreath, so maybe coming together to create, which is what happens. We come together and we create. Now it gets super weird, guys, when you start looking at these foundling organizations. This arm, I can't I can't point this out enough. um this right here is interesting in itself. There we go, a little bit better, right? So the Temple of Artemis. And, this goes back, what we're told is like several thousand years. Maybe it's older than that. Maybe it has taken place many times. So it gets super crazy. And another interesting point I'll point out here is that we have the black Artemis figure. I think that, rather than this showing like a skin color, which it could be, guys, everybody out there, I think at one point race wasn't a big deal. But who knows. I think it's just demonstrating duality. This is looking a little bit more Egyptian, Greco-Egyptian maybe, with the headdress and everything going on. So there's a lot of symbolism here, I guess is what I'm saying. A lot of different creatures. um and I think it is, could be a suggestion that there is an organization of some kind here in this realm that starts things up and rolls out genetics. And is it possible that the genetics of, oh wow, Diana and the slaves gives us an idea of what happened to the adults? I think that's possible, right? We look at the foundlings, we're like, what happened to all the adults, right? Like, were they all killed? Were they just enslaved in this organization or this facility underground, and their stuff extracted? Or were they just given free reign of an area and able to live their lives without having to raise children or do any of that? Like, was that their promise? Like, were they like, hey guys, you can party all you want? Like, look at, I don't know if they're partying, maybe the guy's ashamed of himself for partying too hard, but there's lots of cool creatures in here also. And it seems to be, it appears as though it's underground, maybe, right? Maybe. Um, so this is interesting. I wish I had a better picture of this. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick for you guys. And sorry about the delay, but I want to get a closer look at this Martin DeVos. Oh, okay. Wow. Well, that's going to be a lot to go through. So this is another, Renaissance artist creating some very detailed, very visually dazzling and interesting stuff. So we'll have to look into that another time. But anyway, the Temple of Artemis. So here's a picture of the one in Ephesus. So, and something I will point out is, remember earlier when I showed you this temple? Remember how I showed you these tiny people walking up to it? Look at how large these people are, guys. We know the size of the pillars and things in that area, in the Roman area. Look at the size of this guy. Look at the fact that this guy over here has a smaller person helping him. Okay. So I really think that we need to consider that we aren't the largest, biggest, most badass people to have existed on this place. Um, I think the next level down, as opposed to us creating smaller people, which we might be doing already, we might be creating these gray aliens. We might be introducing these genetic lines that will be shown to us as alien, right? They might be being created. And when I say we, I just mean beings here on this world, maybe creating the next paradigm, like seems to have happened in the past. It seems to have happened there. So, they loved their architecture. Look at how detailed it all is. We still see like remnants of things that are similar throughout the world, victory arches and so forth. So, Artemis. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a closer look at Artemis here, foundlings, that connection. Okay, and I might have to do a complete another episode on homunculi, because there's kind of a lot to that. And I don't want to make these so long that you guys aren't able to watch and appreciate them, like if you're on a break or something. So, uh, and this is where he gets off into this tangent that perhaps some of the influx of people, like refugees coming out of certain areas based on certain wars and things like that. There's a hypothesis here that they are creating these people and then just rolling them out, spreading them out into the world, saying that they're these refugees that need to go places. I don't know. I'm not in immigration. I can't tell you, where these people are coming from and what's going on there, but it is a thought, and it is something to consider. I think that many, if not all, perspectives are worth consideration. And he goes on further to, detail the percentage, the demographic of people arriving from certain areas to other areas. See what I'm saying? Like most of them unaccompanied, like the ones going to Italy were mostly men. Um, and so it's interesting. The numbers are strange. Read into that, like what do you want, and so there's that connection with the goddess Isis and things like that. Now, is it possible that these temple factories in the past were producing all sorts of living creatures, much like the Blamies and the lycanthropes, and something very similar to an Abraxas chicken head, but this is a donkey headed thing, chimera? So is it possible that genetic manipulation has been going on a lot longer than we think and never stops going on? Because I mean, dude, look at all these kids, man. And then you think about where all of the adults are that would facilitate all of those children. And there's tons of stuff out there, guys, on the drawing a blank. There's tons of stuff out there, guys, on anyway. So, I wanted to get into a little bit like on some fiction, um, some writing that's suggestive of manipulation of groups of people. I think I'm gonna save the rest of everything for the homunculus version. But something I will point out in this one is human cloning. You just go to Wikipedia and look up human cloning, guys, and you get this neat little graph showing the development of zygotes and things. But it also later on, and then there's the history of it, Dolly the sheep, and so on. Go take a look. It's Wikipedia, you'll find it. Different methods. Okay, so there's several different methods. And then they have the uses, actual and potential, right? Now, when they say potential, I'm inclined to think that that's already what they're doing or working with, just not letting us know, right? Ethical implications. Here's where it got pretty interesting to me is current law, current cloning law. Okay. Now, another interesting thing is these places that some forms are legal have, all right, the highest instance of voluntary medical procedure in the world, if you know what I'm saying. So, Australia, some forms legal, right? Therapeutic cloning is now legal in some parts of Australia. Huh. Canada legal, Colombia legal, European Union, some legal, right? Very interesting, dude. It's supposedly it's prohibited. Reproductive cloning is prohibited. So, they're using cloning for like creating organs and things like that. Most likely. Okay. India, some forms legal. India has already succeeded in mammalian cloning. Okay. And one of the reasons why India might be more apt to do some of these things is because Hinduism kind of embedded within there is genetic manipulation or biotechnological intervention. They believe and understand that their gods, created them, like physically created them, not just snap their finger and like poof, they came from nothing. Like, no, there's like a whole very detailed history there. Um, Pakistan, some forms legal. Singapore, okay, uh, prohibits placing the embryo clone in a body of a human or animal. Now, here's an interesting thing. It's prohibited to place a clone in a body of a human or an animal. However, let's say, guys, let's say you have a facility with maybe it's not quite a big giant battery thing like in the Matrix, but let's say you have a place where you don't need a human body or an animal body to grow these things. Then guess what? Singapore is all about it. That's where you want to go, guys. Go get cloned up. United Kingdom, I found this interesting. Some forms are legal. So it's allowing them to investigate treatments for diseases. Okay. Now, the Human Fertilization and Embryology Act of 2008. It's an update of a 1991. It repealed the Cloning Act. Also allows experiments on hybrid human animal embryos. This is in the UK, guys. All right. This is in the UK. And of course, do not forget the US. Okay. 10 states: California, Connecticut, Illinois, Iowa, Maryland, Massachusetts, Missouri, Montana, New Jersey, and Rhode Island have clone and kill laws that prevent cloned embryo implantation for childbirth. but allow embryos to be destroyed. So, so they're telling you that yeah, they create them all the time. They create these little people, little homunculi, right? Create them, create them, create them, create them. But they're not allowed to bring them to term. Now, do you really think that they're going to hold back? Or do you think they're just going to go down below the city walls, down underneath that temple, like we were looking at? They're going to go under there, underground, under the temple, right? They're going to go under the castle where they have all of their fun stuff going on underground. Is that why Artemis is black, representing the underground? Possibility. Thought just came to mind, so I thought I'd throw it out there. But so if you think that nothing is going on as far as cloning, you're sadly mistaken. Um, Not to say Wikipedia is up on everything that it posts, but I mean this is based on the laws of the land right now, right? Stem cell, acts, things like this ties into some weird stuff, about like abortion and all that. I don't really want to get into that, but you know, penalties for human cloning. California, only civil. There's no criminal repercussions. So all those folks in Hollywood that you love that like should be like on their deathbed like 50 years ago, but are still somehow like going, no, they're just living in California so that they can grow clones of themselves and harvest all of the goodies and stuff. Same thing with Virginia. Therapeutic cloning, not applicable. So that therapeutic means like something's wrong with you. You can clone yourselves, you can clone yourself, just like the island. Okay. it's it's happening, guys. It's happening. Okay. Some forms legal. Many places throughout the world, strategically placed, guys. Spread right around. This would allow them to, oh, and look at one little country down here in Africa. So this would allow these people to be moved around. What's interesting though is I don't see it being anything being legal in Russia, but right next door to Russia, we have some forms legal areas. So just a thought, right? Very interesting stuff. And it's just a thought, guys. And I think we'll save the homunculus conversation for the next episode. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. And before I let you go, let's look at this chain of being thing again. I want to point something out that I found interesting. And it could be something, it could be nothing. But down here at the bottom, we have, you can look at it like it's a crown. But here's what I see when I look at this. There are ancient maps that have the Eastern Hemisphere divided into three, thusly. Okay. Now, just like this, flip that over, right? We have Asia, Europe, Africa. Okay. Asia looks fine. Europe and Africa, one looks like it's on fire, one looks like it's underwater, maybe. So, was this created around the time that the cataclysms were happening back in like the 1500s? Just a thought, guys. And of course, we can't really read too much of what's going on here, unfortunately, um, which is weird, right? But there's a lot of symbolism in this paint, in this etching, in this painting. Um, we have the sun going around the center, and the center is creation, or Earth. So there's an argument for your flat Earth folks, maybe. Um, is this priest over here talking to a small monkey or a small person? Like, we don't know, right? So, I don't think that it's a far cry or far from reality at all to think or believe that this symbol here, this goddess, is more than just a personification of an idea. Is it a realization of an idea? And that's what I'll leave you with here today. And, I want to thank you guys for tuning in once again. And we'll be back with more. And yeah, you know, recommend, like, subscribe, uh, go check out the podcast. We'll have some different stuff coming up there soon for your little bit longer form conversations and things over there at Red Thread Podcast on most pod players. But in the meantime, thanks again. Have a good day.